Welcome, everybody. This is Dane Dunstan, and welcome to the sponsorship of the Shipping Carbonization Engaging with the Blue Economy today. We're going to have a great program. Unusually, we have three experts with us today, so it's going to be a lot of information. Let me introduce ourselves. This is a joint venture of the Ocean Exchange and Marine Technology Society. Ocean Exchange is sponsored by a number of companies, Wallenius Wilhelmsen, Gulfstream, and a number of other foundations, focused on both sustainability and particularly with the shipping industry. So let's have the next slide, please, Alice. It is a company, organization that gives out some awards every year at our annual conference in Fort Lauderdale, bringing finalists in from around the world with some very interesting solutions, one of which you're going to see today. There are two awards, the Orcel Award, which is sponsored by Wallenius Wilhelmsen, $100,000 for sustainable shipping and logistics, so we're going to be talking about that topic today. And the Neptune Award is for sustainable oceans and coastlines and water in general. We also do some collegiate awards there, so that's really important work. Next slide. Marine Technology Society is an amazing organization to focus on connecting professionals with the different groups, bringing groups together, catalyzing change in the industry and in the solutions, something that we're going to really be talking about today, in particular with decarbonization, and then communicating what needs to be done, what's being accomplished, and how we're all working together. So welcome, everybody. Let's go to the next slide. Please,
Dane?
Anka?
Yes. Yeah, Dane, let me jump in here. So I am Stanka Willis, the president of the Marine Technology Society. And if you could go back a slide. So it's great to be with the Ocean Exchange again for this seminar series that we do jointly. And as Dane said, we are a professional society established in 1963 on the premise that it's important to foster advances in marine science and technology that benefits humankind and contributions to the sustainability of the planet. And we have individual, corporate, and institutional members from 20 countries. We do connect through our sections, and we have also started to bring our events back in person as well as virtually. And this year we are highlighting, we just completed our Oceans in Chennai, India, which was very successful. And in the fall, we'll have both a buoy technology workshop as well as our Oceans 2022 in Hampton Roads. So we hope that you can join us. Just want to mention a couple of programs that we have. Our Certified Marine Technology Program and CMAR Sci. This is a ladder of certifications that allows folks to get that recognition for their efforts in this organization. And we also have, through our early career ocean professionals and for our students, a new program called Emerge, where we are offering travel ships to our oceans conferences, and as well as a mentoring program through the program called Emerge. So I ask you all to come to our website to see all these exciting events. And as Dane knows so well from his role in both these webinars as well as in his company, that communications is really critical. Got to be able to translate that impact of this technology. And so with that, Dane, I'm going to throw it back to you to work with our amazing panel for this webinar. Thank you, Dane.
Great, thank you. So let me just sort of kick off here with a couple of thoughts and put this all in perspective. I'm in the middle of preparing for another webcast tomorrow where we're bringing together a number of the top executives in the world's shipping and supply chain areas. And I was looking for a framework for how to frame the hour talk and conversation. And I found an article from the Harvard Business Review last week about how what's happening in Eastern Europe is affecting the global supply chain. And they broke it down into 4 boxes, and I thought this was interesting. The first box was, got to look at geography and geopolitics. The second is, we've got to look at logistics and how we work around all of the sanctions and what's going on. And the third was decarbonization and sustainability. So even in the middle of everything that's going on over there, we've got to be focused on decarbonization. It really becomes critically important. And one of the problems with it that they specifically talked about is the problem of visibility. All of the ESG rules require visibility, but visibility is very, very difficult to get. So we're going to be talking about that in particular today, and you'll meet Natalia Mikhailova, co-founder and CEO of WeVair. One of the people who's going to be on this call tomorrow is Eric McNulty, who is the founder of and director of strategy for Harvard's National Preparedness Leadership Initiative. They do a lot of study. They study every crisis. So believe me, they're deep into understanding how we lead through the crisis that we find ourselves in right now. One of the things that they discovered when they studied the Boston Marathon bombing was that what happens in a situation where nobody's in charge? In the follow-up to the Boston Marathon bombing, trying to find the bombers, there was no single agency in charge. Every single agency had to work together, and it was an informal kind of working relationship that they came to call swarm thinking. And as I thought about it, that really applies to what we're trying to do in shipping decarbonization and sustainability in the supply chain in general. Nobody's in charge of that. There's no one government agency or UN agency, or everybody's working on it. And the spirit of it came into 5 things. Unity of mission. We all understand what the mission is. We're all working very, very hard to get there. David Cummins at Blue Sky Maritime Coalition, he can't call me up and give me instructions on what to do. But boy, if he did, I'd certainly jump in and do everything I could, because I know how hard he's working. Andrew Moffat, who's with us today, the Office of Global Change at the Department of State, if they had something that they needed and I knew where to help them find it, we'd be doing that. And so would you. We would all be doing that. So unity of mission, generosity of spirit and action, stay in your lane, but help others in theirs. No ego, no blame. If I make a mistake, you're on my side, you help me through it. And finally, a foundation of trusting relations. And I can't think of a better description of what we're going to be talking about today and what's going on. So let me make the introductions. We're going to be hearing first from Andrew Moffat, who's with us. Unfortunately, he's not on video, but he's with the Office of Global Change, the U.S. Department of State, and has been a longtime career diplomat. David Cummins, who used to be in the oil business, changed and joined as Blue Sky Maritime Coalition, created that a few years ago, and is doing great work. He's in Houston. And Natalia Mikhailova, she is the co-founder and CEO of WeVair. So hi, everybody, and great to have you. And we'll be talking with you soon. But I want to hand over to Andrew. And Andrew, talk to us about what you're seeing from your position.
Well, thank you, Dane. First, yeah, thank you and Danka for inviting me and others at the Ocean Exchange and the Marine Technology Society for having me. And a huge hat tip to all of you who are putting together these impactful webinars, but more importantly, this really important network that helps us all exchange information and get the best contacts to further our work. I'm glad you spoke about shipping decarbonization. That is the topic of today's webinar, because this is key for the State Department and the United States more generally. In the next few minutes, I want to touch on 3 things. So I'd like to give a high-level context for what the Special Presidential Envoy on Climate in this office is doing as it relates to shipping decarbonization. And I'd like to use the coming Our Ocean Conference, which is kicking off the middle of April, as an example of this. And finally, talk a little bit about some of the key initiatives that we're putting forward and are highlighting that are relevant to the shipping sector. So first, what is it that we're doing here on climate? What are our goals? Well, I want to take a step back actually and look at the Conference of Parties 26. This is COP26 that was in Glasgow last November, the key annual climate negotiation conference. And our office certainly sees us, the United States, but also the world, now being in a much better position. After the COP26 in Glasgow, we're substantially closer to keeping our 1.5 degree limit on temperature rise goal within reach. And a major outcome from that conference was that 65% of the global economy is now aligned with a 1.5 degree goal through their enhanced nationally determined contributions, or those high-level plans that governments put forward to mitigate climate change. So that's significant in a positive direction. Now, this year, the office is focused on what we're calling implementation plus. And so that means implementing these existing commitments and actions while advancing new ones, because we're not quite there yet. Folks on this call will know that 2022 is what we're calling the ocean super year. There's a number of government conferences. The French just had their One Ocean conference in Brest. There's the Our Ocean conference in Palau in April that I'll talk about in a moment. The UN Ocean conference this summer in Lisbon, and a number of others. So there's opportunities that we see to implement and enhance initiatives to decarbonize the shipping sector. And in general terms, in an ideal world, what we're doing is we're helping provide the context and the encouragement for governments and others to take those measures that are needed to create a supporting environment for actually doing the work on the ground and in the seas, like my fellow speakers, David and Natalia, will talk about coming up. So if we can switch to talking a little about the Our Ocean Conference as an example of what this work looks like. Do you mind moving to the next slide? In a 35,000-foot view, the Our Ocean Conference, it's the next in a series of conferences that happens annually, although it was postponed the last couple of years due to COVID. Originally launched by the United States back in 2014, and this year will be co-hosted by the President of Palau, President Whips, and the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry. The focus is this year, as in all years, is not on negotiations. It's not like a COP. It's kind of the opposite, actually. There's nothing to negotiate. Instead, the whole focus is getting dignitaries, heads of government, CEOs in front of the world to announce new commitments that they're going to do to further our agenda. And as I mentioned, the attendee list is robust and includes many high-level representatives from governments from around the world. The next slide, please. Previously, we've had over 1,400 commitments, and starting this in 2014, and the amount of money we've been able to mobilize, candidly, it's a big deal. Over $90 billion the last 6 conferences, and we're hoping to get close to $100 billion in total by the end of this 7th conference in a number of different sectors. In this chart here, you'll see over 247 commitments just in the blue economy sector, which is going to include decarbonizing the shipping sector. And we'll get a little more into what that looks like this year in a second. Next slide, please. This year, unsurprisingly, the 2 major themes are going to be the importance of ocean-based climate solutions, which includes significant action on decarbonizing the shipping sector and improving the lives of those in small island developing states, given the location in Palau. But beyond that, we'll be discussing a number of other issues. Next slide, please. So last, I'd like to finish by just talking about several of the initiatives we've highlighted over the last year and will continue to highlight, including at the Our Ocean Conference, that are relevant to decarbonizing the shipping sector, and I think are really a robust example of what the U.S. government and others are doing to push the ball forward. So first, we'll see just a couple of these high-level government commitments, including the Clydebank Declaration and the Declaration on Zero-Emission Shipping by 2050. The Clydebank Declaration is interesting, I think, especially for this group. We launched it with the United Kingdom at COP26 in Glasgow last November. And signatory states, through this declaration, they announced their ambition to set up and support the establishment of green shipping corridors, or zero-emission shipping routes, between 2 or more ports. United States, we are a signatory, and we expect to announce additional signatories this year. Similarly, but on a different side of government commitments, is the Declaration on Zero Emission Shipping by 2050. So this was announced also at COP26 between the United States, Denmark, and the Marshall Islands. We need to have the Marshall Islands here because signatories essentially pledged to work within the International Maritime Organization, or the IMO, to adopt a goal of zero emissions from international shipping by 2050. And it also pledged to adopt goals leading to that 2050 decarbonization, interim goals by 2030 and 2040 to make sure the sector is on this pathway. So 11 other countries supported this in Glasgow in November, but we expect a number of other countries to come forward with their support, really pushing the IMO as that global organization to get towards the zero emission goal that we all need in order to meet our climate goals. On the next slide, lastly, I'll close by talking a bit about some of the partnerships that are more relevant for the private sector directly, but also kind of stitch this all together. First, we have mission innovation. This is absolutely key. It brings together high ambition alliance countries and private sector and research institutes, all to make innovation progress fast enough to demonstrate that zero emission pathways exist, right? This is led by the U.S. Department of Energy as our innovation lead. Denmark and Norway have leading roles, as well as the Global Maritime Forum. And key is the Maris McKinney Moeller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping, who has a leading role in this mission innovation project on decarbonizing the shipping sector. And between us, we'll have some highlight for this mission innovation at the Ocean Conference, and the Maersk Center plans to attend as well. So look forward to more on that in April. Next, the First Movers Coalition. So this was actually launched by U.S. President Joe Biden at COP26. And essentially, the First Movers Coalition brings in companies that are willing and able to create early markets for key technology. There's a subsection within the First Movers Coalition for decarbonizing the shipping sector, where members commit to using zero-emission fuels and retrofitting existing vessels by 2030. There's some commitments for carriers and for cargo owners as well, all to put them along the path of 100% decarbonization by 2050 and 2040, respectively. And last, green shipping corridors. Many of the folks in this room will actually be far more involved in implementing green shipping corridors than we are in the State Department. But this is still something that we really want to highlight at the Ocean Conference, because it really is on the ground effort to make sure that we're doing everything we can to put the infrastructure in place and make those investments now that will lead to decarbonization by 2050. At the conference, there's going to be a number of companies and ports and governments and their joint efforts that are highlighted to demonstrate that this is not only possible, but it's already happened, and under that rubric of implementation plus that we're shooting for here in 2022. So this is just a short list of some of those efforts that the U.S. government, through the State Department and others, are putting forward this year, highlighting this year, and are excited about this year. And as you can see, there's clearly a huge amount of work moving forward, and the office that I work in is eager to partner with them, helping decarbonize the shipping sector. I'll stop there and just thank you all, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thanks, Andrew. We'll stick around because we're going to have some questions for you in just a few minutes. Let me hand over to you, David, and tell us what you're doing with the Blue Sky organization.
Yeah, so Blue Sky officially launched last summer, but we've been working on it for a few years, which is a group of every player, direct, indirect, supporting, that in some way plays a part in a maritime value chain. So rather than thinking of it as just shipping, it's, you know, decisions that are made that cause things to move by a ship. It's just a value chain where at one point in the middle of it, something floats. So we pulled the coalition together based on to drive to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, and to understand where the challenges were going to be, and then to be an action-oriented group and not a think tank, to actually design projects and work with anybody and everybody that we could to unblock whatever barriers we were coming across. If we could flip down a couple of slides, I think the first one is just a header slide of mine. Yeah, go to the, yes. So when we were pulling this together, we had interviewed the entire industry. We thought, the world has a lot of coalitions. There's Maersk McKinney Miller out there. There's, the Getting to Zero Coalition, GMF. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good work. One thing that was being neglected was not the large ocean-going blue water trade routes that move things around the world on large ships, but the domestic inland waterways. So we set our scope around the US and Canada, where most of the emissions come from tugboats and not from large tankers, where vessel lives tend to be 40, 50, 70, 80 years and not 25. So while the challenge is the same, the solution space is quite different. But then we quickly set up these, we call them knowledge partnerships. So we link with Maersk McKinney Miller, we link with GMF, we link up with the International Chamber of Shipping, because in doing this, the one thing we realized that if we're going to get to a zero emission, a decarbonized world, and it's going to take collaboration that this industry has never shown in literally millennia how to do. Everything has always been a stepwise transactional thing. So if we could go to the next slide. With that vision in place of a net zero greenhouse gas, and when I use the word net zero, there are some standard definitions for that it's not exactly what we're talking about. So there may be some offset types of things depending on how the fuel is made, such that you get lower emissions there, or there may be carbon capture and storage. But what we really mean by net zero is we're about climate change. So we don't want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by creating more black carbon that's dumped into the oceans or everything. So we want to make sure that we're not inadvertently driving just about carbon and carbon equivalent. We're looking at what is really driving down the footprint to zero in waterborne transportation. Again, I mentioned, if you look in the dark blue area in there in the middle, the way we're organized is we have four sort of foundational work streams, we call them, of where we think the big barriers are. So they're listed left to right. They're financial, the way banks lend into the industry, commercial and chartering, so the way contractually cargo owners interact with ship owners and operators. There's also policy, regulatory, and incentives, meaning incentivizing first movers. The transition period, you're not going to get there unless we come up with a level playing field. Technology, infrastructure, and new alternative fuels is a big part of it, and that'll go through a transition phase as well. And then our last work stream was, even if you don't change anything to do with financing or the way we commercially interact, you don't change anything about policy and regulation, you don't change anything about technology or fuels, we're not measuring what the emissions are right now. And you would measure things in a very different way than what you do for international vessels. If you're dealing with a dredging vessel, or you're dealing with a ferry that just goes back and forth once a day from point to point, or you're dealing with commercial fishing vessels, or you're dealing with tugboats where there's no one-to-one relationship because they're moving dozens of barges up and down the Mississippi River. So we need to start turning on technology that exists today around artificial intelligence, around digitalization, to really optimizing the value chain as a whole, and not optimizing each ship owner's vessels or each charter's routes or each port, but optimize the entire system, because we're stuck a little bit in the tragedy of the commons here. So we decided the only way we're going to do this is we're going to have to set up a nonprofit separate organization. We do need to stay connected with everything that's going on, but we wanted the entire value chain. If you're actually going to change the entire value chain, we need the breadth and depth of voices from across that chain. So direct influences like ship owners and shipbuilders, fuel providers. That's existing ones like oil companies, but it's also new ones that are coming up that are purely about making green hydrogen or green methanol. But then also indirect influences, the classification societies, and original equipment manufacturers like engine providers, port authorities, and then the supporting, the legal service providers, the financiers, the banks, other NGOs, academia. So if we go to the next slide, again, the idea is we know how to design new fuels. We're building engines right now that'll run on hydrogen and ammonia. Or we're in the final design stages that. We know how to change policy and regulation. That tends to be a lagging indicator rather than a leading one. We understand how to do commercial, constructs that are different from today. And the industry is leading a lot of this change. And again, we really know how to do these measures. It's just getting the whole industry to stop acting competitive at every single stepwise transactional thing that happens along the value chain. And then you start looking for ways for those groups to connect. So if we could go to the next slide. With collaboration being key, one of the things that we're working on right now is we're working on in fact, we'll be producing a paper next week. We've got to do things right now in the transition around fuels. If you start with alternative fuels, we can be doing more LNG right now, but we have to do a heck of a lot of work on methane, which we've committed to doing, and our government is committed to doing. We have to do a lot of work on carbon capture as well, and we have to build towards a future of green LNG. So you can't just prolong this as a way to put off doing those things. At the same time, the kinds of things that are going to be drop-in and won't take that long to do infrastructure for, biodiesel and methanol. It's about scaling up volume on those things. And even if you start with a methanol that's gray or blue, and you have a plan to move it into green, that's going to happen in the short term. Hydrogen and hydrogen-based, green hydrogen-based is going to take some time, but you've got to be doing a tremendous amount of research right now. And you've got to really be out there figuring these things out in the niche areas where there is a commercial construct right now for hydrogen. But at the same time, we think this is going to be industry-led, sort of. It's going to be led by everybody on this value chain, all these direct players, indirect players, working together. And because you're not going to come up with solutions just by taking them one step at a time. You need about 10 of those different types of organizations, from R&D to port authorities to ship owners to cargo owners to the public sector. Academia is going to get involved, class societies, engine manufacturers. They all have to be working in concert if we're going to come up with this. So we are essentially, if you look at our list of members, it reads like a who's who of every single category I've described. And from the time we launched last June with 22 CEOs that really wanted to make a difference, we've grown to 75. And we're driving action. We're not just sitting around talking about possible solutions. We're driving action. We're driving against the roadmap. So the next slide, please. Thank you. We'll get to questions later.
Thank you, David. Really good stuff. Yeah, and stick with us because we've got a lot of questions around what you're doing. Natalia, welcome. Big fan of Weave Air. Have seen you guys at Ocean Exchange. Tell us what you're up to right now and what's the state of Weave Air.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dane. It's very nice to see so many great experts here. Yes, Weaver is a company that has a vision to make shipping more sustainable through direct measurement of the emissions, as well as other solutions that we have in order to not just make it more, be able to use data in an effective way to track the emissions along the full logistics and supply chain, but also to make it safer while doing that. So we are very happy to be part of Ocean Exchange community as one of the winners of the award. And we have been making a lot of progress recently. So over the last few months, since we launched actually our product quite recently, and we are very happy to be working with some of the leading organizations in the shipping industry, and also very happy that the industry right now is really kind of realizing the need for better metrics and better measurement tools, and also understanding that those kind of tools are essential not just to be able to track and kind of follow the regulation, but also be able to actually make improvements, because without measuring, it's very difficult to improve. And often, those type of new fuels like ammonia, LNG, or others, or other kind of efficiency solutions that are being implemented on board of the vessels, they require something that is not just calculation, but actually like direct measurement. So if you could go on to the next slide. As I was saying, our mission is to enable the use of actionable insights to make the shipping smarter and more efficient, as well as decarbonize it much faster. And part of where we are coming from is, of course, there is a certain regulatory push that kind of made it more incentive for the organizations to shift into this different low carbon technology. But of course, as David was also mentioning, it's very critical for us to be able to work together, not just compete, and be able to actually learn from each other's success. If you could move on to the next slide. The way that we are doing this is basically to address some of the big challenges that we found in the industry. One of the issues that we found is often it's very time consuming to report and measure things. And this is relating, we are operating actually in two different areas. One is the emission tracking and reduction, and the second one is safety. And we found that in both of those areas, there is a critical need for better, more accurate data that is shared across the industry. That also makes it more predictive and ways to address those emissions more faster. If you could move on to the next slide. The current process that we have developed was developed over 10 years as part of my PhD in engineering, and building solutions that monitor and quantify as well as reduce different pollutants. If you could move on to the next slide. This work has been done with the Partnership of Environment Canada and Ministry of Environment. And after completing my PhD in this area, I was really passionate to be able to solve these issues, and how can we reduce the cost, time, and risks for both the loss prevention process as well as the decarbonization process in the shipping industry. If you could move on to the next slide. The way that we are addressing this problem is by combining a unique data collection system that we have developed in-house with the real-time emission metering as well as timely risk prevention system. So we do this by combining a sensor system, digital checklist that is we work with our partners to provide. And this solution enables cost savings, time savings, and preventing the incidents by deterring malpractices. For example, we are noticing a lot that sometimes, if you're operating the engine in a certain way, the calculation of the emissions is not always accurate, and often the industry has been experiencing a lot of losses due to some of the new fuels that are being used is actually kind of a mix of different additives, which are not only kind of impactful on reducing the emissions, but sometimes can be harmful for the engines themselves. So yeah, there is a lot of opportunity to take action and to encourage the stakeholders to move forward. Next slide, please. So the way it works is that we have this proprietary system that enables us to use the data, build data models by combining the sensor and the mechanical and electrical system, as well as the emission tracking, as well as external data sources, which are also critical to build data models and build the decarbonization and risk prevention decision support system. Next slide, please. So this technologies is something that we can deploy on every vessel. We basically add sensors to track different metrics. And this is suitable not just for the vessels like tugboats or commercial vessels, but also for the ports. And we have been deploying this in such environments. So they track different factors, including carbon, sulfur, nitric oxide particles. Recently, we have been also getting a lot of interest about the ammonia. And using this information, we are basically able to get kind of continuous track of those emissions and also connect this in real time to other systems. Next slide, please. Using this information, we can also track different interventions that are being implemented, including efficiency technologies. Often there is a lot of opportunity to improve the energy efficiency on board of the vessels to further reduce the emissions, and also scrubber technologies, as the industry has been kind of shifting from the scrubber to new fuels. It's important to compare and benchmark against what is the actual things that are being effective. Next slide, please. If you could go, yes. Another example I would like to give is we are also working on a way to more effectively not just decarbonize the shipping, but also make it more prevent many of the losses and as well as safety issues. So, for example, we are doing modeling on the data that is being collected about the routes and optimizing these routes to be able to accomplish both of the goals of reducing, for example, cargo losses, while also reducing the carbon footprint of those vessels. Next slide, please. So we are currently working with many partners. We are based in Canada, Singapore, and South Korea. We are working with many partners in those regions and outside, like Japan, Spain, and others. And we currently are really ramping up our solution. We are, have a lot of interest from both big and small maritime organizations, classification societies, as well as ship owners and managers and insurers. So we are very excited to bring this technology to the market. Next slide, please. So I also want to mention that we are very lucky to have been recognized by many awards across the application areas of our solution. Next slide, please. And we would like to actually invite you, because we are launching a very big movement right now, which is using this data that is collected, and in some cases it's anonymized data. The challenge, the kind of reason behind this is we would like organizations to really participate. We would like them to learn from each other's success and to be able to be more open and transparent in sharing data. So we are building sort of a repository of data across different types of vessels, including smaller and bigger vessels, both on the emission front and also on the incident tracking and prevention. So if anyone in the audience is interested or knows somebody who would like to participate, we are very much happy to invite you to this network, and looking forward to collaborate together to reduce the environmental impact and improve safety, as well as establish a new standard. Next slide, please. In summary, Weaver is a company that is here to be able to really improve the process of data collection, analysis, and also predictive modeling, to be able to offer the industry new tools and new ways to aggregate information. Each shipping company, each manager or owner of the vessel often has their own system, which are very distinct from each other, which makes it very difficult to build kind of interoperable solution. But this is where we are strong in, and this is our focus, is to be able to build models and to show how what is the most effective strategies. And we are very would like you to invite you to join us on this journey. Thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussion in the follow-up.
Well, great. Thank you, Natalia. Really appreciate it. And we have a question from Renata Borges asking, will it be possible to receive the material presented? And Renata, yes. On the right side on the control panel, you'll see a button that says handouts, and the presentations are in there, so you can take a look. So, Natalia, I think that of everything that's going on, one of the most important parts of all of this is the data, and we're really in a sweet spot. What's happening worldwide with programs like this that are giving us visibility into what's happening is so critical. David, do you have any questions about that for Natalia, or?
No, I think we're seeing, well, we're seeing the same exact thing in what we're doing, and data is something that we have the technology to do right now. I am curious, it's what are you actually doing to drive collaboration? I mean, you mentioned the need for getting competitors to come in and share data in that presentation, but what types of techniques are you using?
Yeah, great question, David. In fact, this is a very important point for us. So what we found is that there is a certain types of incentives that really drive people to want to collaborate. This includes, many organizations. As you mentioned, it's a very competitive industry, and often part of, even though we want to encourage the people not just to compete but to collaborate, sometimes the competitive techniques sometimes help drive this kind of collaborations, ironically enough. So what we are offering them, if they participate in the system, is to be able to learn from the data that was not possible to acquire before. So each ship owner and ship manager often is very they value the anonymity of the data. So they don't want to be able to share it because they are afraid of certain types of somebody else making use of it. So but at the same time, there is a lot that can be learned across the industry. So what we are offering is a unique kind of data warehouse that allows you to share the data without compromising anonymity. So essentially, what we are offering is a kind of data engine that allows you to compare apples to apples, like different kind of strategies, for example, in decarbonization, and be able to for them to really without having as much expensive investment to learn what has worked and what has not worked for others in the industry. So we found this is a very effective tool to encourage people to participate, this transparency that has not been really existent in the industry before, and it's driving interest of many of those players. And also the kind of solutions right now is very often time consuming in order to kind of collect this data, analyze it. It's not very often the format of the data is very not very straightforward or easy to work with. So there is a lot of appreciation across our customers of putting the data in the right format, something that they can extract not just kind of data points, but actually insights from. And this is something that was also very difficult for them to achieve so far. So it's very exciting for us to have this opportunity to contribute, and we have been really also impressed by the interest in this area, despite the traditional kind of outlook of most shipping companies and stakeholders in these industries.
That's great. Andrew, how about you? Any questions?
Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit about the policy side. So I'm wondering if you have thoughts, Natalia, on the types of policies that have led to increased adoption of this type of technology, or even policies that could lead to increased adoption.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think policy is critical as well, and especially like data-driven policies, in my opinion, is the most effective. in terms of testing what actually the results of certain types of policy interventions. So yes, we did notice that sometimes of course the new regulations on requiring, for example, reporting does contribute in the industry in taking actions, but sometimes it has unintended effects. For example, usually the most kind of straightforward and most least thoughtful approach sometimes is taken, which is, I don't blame the companies for this, but sometimes it's not the most effective approach. Like, for example, the calculation is the most common tool used to just use the the distance traveled, the fuel burned, and it's just like a kind of approximation. Sometimes this approximation is not terrible, but often it does not give you the best tool to actually reduce the emissions and actually to improve things. So yeah, I think the policies, effective policies, could be implemented using data, and in particular, we really need to be mindful of measuring the results of the policies, especially encouraging people to adopt new system that is, I guess, more reliant on direct measurement rather than kind of estimation and calculation. I'm not saying estimation and calculation is bad, but it's better than nothing. But of course, there is better ways to do it. And so, yeah, that's why I've seen, very future-forward organizations are taking the step, and they're contacting us, and they're very interested to implement solutions. But it's 90% of the industry, I would say, is still really, I guess they need to be incentivized more through other tools, such as kind of staying competitive and so on. So I think, yeah, it's critical to put in the right incentives and kind of in place, both in terms of carrot and the stick.
Natalia, can you talk a little bit about your fundraising plans and how you're thinking over the next 2 or 3 years to be financing your work?
Yes, great question. Yeah, so right now we have been financed by some of this different non-dilutive funding, which we are very happy to receive because of the realization of the importance of this field. But of course, in order to grow the company more quickly, we'll be raising Series A financing in about 5 to 6 months, and we already have some interest, but always happy to hear more from investors who care about this type of problem and have connections within the domain.
David, do you have any thoughts about funding strategy?
Well, from our side, from a nonprofit corporation, most of our funding strategy is from donations, either through government grants or private donors. But I think in general, from a business standpoint, whether you're talking about investors or donors, yeah, I think Natalia hit the nail on the head. You've got to find those people that are passionate about this space. In the US, we're looking for people that are passionate about it more, not just from a commercial I can get rich standpoint, but from the innovative pioneer spirit, the Lewis and Clark, it's kind of, and there is a lot of that out there that we're tapping into. So the way I would say in our organization, we started building our membership and building our funding by preaching to the choir, so to speak. Find those people that we know are very passionate about the space.
So Natalia, a question has come in from the audience. I understand that you were accepted into the Washington State Blue Maritime Incubator. Can you talk a little bit about how that's going to help you?
Yeah, great question. Yes, we are very fortunate to be a part of this incubator, and already have been like forming really critical connections. I think it has been most helpful so far on the side of partnerships, and also really understanding, because as David was mentioning, the types of kind of environment, the types of emissions that or the types of vessels that are mostly should be the focus on in US and Canada is different, for example, from the Singapore, which is where we were also doing a lot of our projects, or in Korea. So it's very critical for us to adapt our solution to the needs of the industry, whether it's, you know, like looking at the emissions of tugboats or looking at the commercial vessels. They all have very different systems and, you know, that needs. We can adapt our solution, but it's really critical for us to solve their pain points, to make it very easy for them to do this. And that's part of the challenges and kind of the approach we have from this program, is to really learn as much as possible from the partners and from the community, and also kind of build a community. Our goal is not just to kind of participate as a company to join this incubator, but also to set up kind of a regional operations in the US, so which is planned for us in this year. So yes, we are very excited to be part of it, and already learning and adapting our solution, and looking forward to continuing to do so.
David, I've got a question for you for Roy Robinson on the question of safety with ammonia as an alternative fuel. It says, to be used as fuel, it must be anhydrous, not the dilute form usually shipped, and burning it gives off tremendous amounts of nitrous oxide. Can you talk a little bit about how we make that safe? And Andrew, you may have some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, rather than getting too deep into the technical areas, which I'll get in over my head very quickly if I even try to do that. But the point is very valid, that it's not just pick a fuel because it can produce lower emissions. You have to think about safety. You have to think about safety of the crew members. And the question is right on the money. Yeah, a small engine fire on an anhydrous ammonia vessel kills everybody on the crew very quickly. So you have to design systems. Now, there are engines and storage systems, delivery systems that are being designed in that. I think, and again, our coalition is producing a position paper on how the transition of fuels will go. Ammonia is something that's way down the road for a lot of safety reasons. Hydrogen as well, more for a lot of infrastructure types of reasons, but both of those are going to be, there's some massive challenges in those areas. You know, even you could consider nuclear as a future fuel that there are massive challenges with as well. So the point is well taken. We don't have all the answers, but you absolutely have to get all those answers in place, because you can't clean up the environment and then kill your crew. It's just not, that's not sustainable.
Hey, Millie, welcome and great to see you. We've got a couple of questions on availability of the presentations, which are not in the handouts, and also a question to David, could you share your contact information? Could we get some of that out to people?
There we go. You'd think after 2 years I'd know to unmute. We record this, and then you can look at our website and MTS. You can look, Ocean Exchange has a LinkedIn group, and we will put the link to that so that you will see the embedded presentations. And Natalia, I think you too, David, have your contact information in there. You can get it from their websites. If you want to contact them and then get the actual, you know, copies or pieces of that, you can. But you'll see the whole recording, and you'll see the embedded presentation. So thanks. I like that there's interest in that. Natalia, so good to see you. You know, we always try to have a startup with us, and they are scraping together funds to get going. We gave WeaveAir $25,000 of non-dilutive funds, and we're, you know, really proud to say we do that kind of work. So thank you all for being here, Andrew, David, and Natalia. And thanks to Dane. Dane does this for us. He's a great friend. We have a live event in Florida, and he also moderates that, and he's, you know, he's the greatest. So next slide, please. We need feedback. We've adopted and adapted changes over months and several years. Contact us. There's my contact information. I want to thank our sponsors. We couldn't do this, and David couldn't do it without his members, and MTS couldn't do it without their members. The whole ecosystem is important. Next slide. We have behind the scenes people that work on the Ocean Exchange side, the MTS side. Thank you all. You're all the best. There is a webcast library on our website. You know, again, if you want to go back, not just this one, and look at some of the prior ones. We partnered with MTS last year, just about every month, maybe 10 or 11 months out of the year. We're going to do it quarterly since we're all moving to more in-person events this year. But if there's a particular topic, you know, go look into that library and see if there's information that's useful for you. Next slide. Oh, no, that's it. Okay. Thank you all very much. We have one coming up at the end of June. Watch on social media, on our websites, join our mailing lists, and you'll get all the information.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.